Olá, este é o STJ Entrevista, um programa do Superior Tribunal de Justiça. E aqui recebemos autoridades e especialistas para falar sobre temas relevantes, tanto nas discussões jurídicas e acadêmicas, quanto no dia a dia da população. E no programa de hoje, vamos abordar como o sistema de justiça dos Estados Unidos atua no combate ao racismo e na busca pela equidade racial. Para explorar esse assunto, convidamos o juiz Rowan Wilson, presidente do Tribunal de Justiça do Estado de Nova York, primeiro magistrado negro a ocupar esse cargo. Ele é graduado e pós-graduado em Direito pela Universidade de Harvard e, ao longo da carreira na advocacia, atuou em diversas causas pro bono e também para entidades sem fins lucrativos. Então, vamos conferir como foi essa conversa. So, it's a great pleasure to have you here on our program, STJ Entrevista.
Well, thank you, Samantha. It's wonderful to be here.
To begin with, how is racial discrimination legally defined in the United States? Are such actions treated as crimes as they are in Brazil, Chief Judge Wilson?
So much racial discrimination, when it occurs in the housing context or employment context, those sorts of things, are not criminal. They're civil. They can have monetary penalties attached to them. Those are typically not considered criminal. Where it becomes criminal is where there is a crime, for example, a murder or a shooting or assault that is racially motivated. Then it's elevated. It becomes what's called a hate crime. And those are punished more severely than the ordinary crime would be. So that's how racism sort of figures legally into the criminal system. In the civil system, there are a wide variety of laws that prohibit discrimination in employment, in housing, in accommodations. Those have existed now for 60 years or so.
Okay. And does the justice system in the United States take an activist or minimalist approach to debating and reinforcing affirmative policies for racial equity?
So that's a complicated question because the justice system, our system of government, like yours, has three different branches. And so when we talk about the justice system, it isn't just the courts. It is also the legislature and it is also the executive branch. So the legislatures, and we have a federal legislature that has federal laws, and we have state legislatures that have state laws, and they can have overlapping laws, and you can be liable under one or both. So whether any one of those is activist or more passive, I guess I would say, depends very much on which state you're talking about, what federal government administration you're talking about, what some laws that have existed for a while end up getting cut back if they were protective. So what you see really is kind of nationally, you see cycles. You see cycles where in the 1950s the courts were really fairly active and the legislature was lagging. And then you see in the 1960s, the executive under first President Kennedy and then President Johnson and the legislature were very active. And then you see some retreat from that at different points, sometimes by the legislature and then sometimes by the courts and sometimes by both. When you're thinking about the states, it's a little bit different. Different states tend to have more of a consistent view as to whether they're active or more passive about racial issues. So, not to call anybody out particularly on the bad side of this equation, but the southern states have a very fraught racial history, and I would not describe most of them as activist. Some of the northern, northeastern, and the far western states, I think, have a better track record and a more consistent emphasis on being active in the protection of against racial discrimination.
Okay, so still on this topic, what efforts are being made about the higher number of Black people affected by police violence and criminal convictions in the United States?
So again, this varies greatly by where you are. And of course, I think that what was called the Black Lives Matter movement, made newspapers around the world because there was a real spate of police violence that I don't know that I would say that there was more police violence against Black and brown people than there had been previously. The difference is there are more cameras. People have cameras on them. The police wear body cameras. There are cameras mounted on light poles in major American cities. And there's now a lot of video capturing what happens. Yeah. And that brought a lot of this to the forefront. So I think there's been a public outcry. And I think many, particularly urban police departments, have been more responsive to those problems. So, I mean, I can talk probably most about New York City. The district attorney, so in New York, there are 5 different parts of the city. We call them boroughs. Manhattan is one, Brooklyn, Bronx, Staten Island, Queens. Each of them has its own district attorney who is sort of the chief prosecutor for crimes that occur in those areas. So those district attorneys now have lists of police officers that they will not call as witnesses at trial, because they have testified untruthfully, it's been caught on video, and they're no longer useful for anything like that. So they have desk jobs, they do other things. And also, you know, there have been prosecutions of police officers who've acted brutally against black and brown people and against others. And the video evidence has really made it, I think, more able for local district attorneys and police departments to police themselves a bit better. And that has been happening.
Okay. And as well as being present in society, does inherent bias also appear in the legal system?
There's a lot of there's biases of many different types, right?
Okay.
There are biases that are I'm not sure I would call them inherent, but there are some people who are just, they will tell you that they are biased. They might not tell you that publicly on TV, but with their close friends, they will, you know, tell racist jokes, they will make racist statements about people, and when they hear themselves say that, they're not thinking, oh, I shouldn't have said that. That's just who they are. Whether you want to call that inherent or not, if they're adults, it probably is inherent. If they're children, it's probably something that could be unlearned. But the greater majority of people, I think, in the United States, and maybe almost everybody, who is not, you know, sort of outwardly biased, has some measures of implicit bias. So you don't think that you're biased about something. You think that you treat people fairly. You want to treat people fairly. But there are things that have happened to you that you're not conscious of, but they form the way that you react to people. And so I don't know about in Brazil if you see this, but in the United States, if you see, you might see somebody walking down the street and the person coming the other direction is a black man. And they'll just move slightly over to the right, where if it was a white man, the person would just continue on course. That person is not thinking consciously, this is a person who is likely to be bad and therefore I'm moving away. The person is probably not, if you asked, are you a biased person? They would say, no, I'm not. They probably don't even realize that they're taking that slight movement away, or that they're flinching or wincing or that sort of thing. Or the store, you know, the store security officer, who when somebody who is Hispanic walks into the store and they're not dressed in a suit, thinks, oh, I've got to watch that person. They're not actually thinking that consciously. That's just, you know, it's you could call it inherent. I think of it as implicit, because it's something that can be unlearned with a lot of effort if the person is willing.
There's a way to eliminate it.
There is.
Yeah.
There is.
How?
Well, so the best is, of course, to start when people are very young. And so let me tell you about my school district when I was a child. I was in Berkeley, California. So at the time, there were school districts in the South who were under court-ordered desegregation orders, right? Because the districts were discriminatory and the courts required them to desegregate. My school district in Berkeley, California was not one of those. It voluntarily desegregated by cutting all of the schools that had been kindergarten through 6th schools into kindergarten through 3rd or 4th through 6th, and then eliminating one of the 2 high schools, so it was only a single high school, and then putting the 2 middle schools in places where just geography forced integration of all of these students. So I grew up in a very integrated environment. I had friends who were, you can almost any, you know, and the Bay Area there were lots of different ethnicities there. I had friends who were, you know, Japanese, Filipino, black, white, Chinese, you know, from everywhere, Malaysian. And you learn that people are like you. And they're not like you because they look like you. And you might dislike somebody who looks like you and really like somebody who doesn't. You start to judge people by how they treat you and who they are as people. So the best is if you can start with young people that way. And it doesn't have to be when they're 4 years old, although that's, you know, ideal. but even when they're in high school or perhaps after high school. So one of the things that my court system is doing is we are bringing in paid interns into the court system to expose them to all sorts of different people. And these tend to be people who come from, young people who come from neighborhoods that are fairly still segregated. Housing in New York is not legally segregated, but because of economics and other factors, there tend to be pockets of different types of people. We can bring these people into the court system for summer jobs. They get paid. They see the court system. They also see each other. And it's little steps like that. There's no one big panacea, but every one of us can do something, whether it's inviting a couple different people to dinner who don't know each other and come from different backgrounds. We can all do little things to chip away at that implicit bias.
Yeah, exactly. Your Honor, any final thoughts?
Well, I have a lot of questions more than thoughts. And part of the reason that I think that the Chief Justice Benjamin had a brilliant idea in bringing people from the United States and from South Africa and from Brazil to Brazil is that we all are facing, at a very high level, the same sort of problem, but our histories are different. Yeah. And at a lower level, the problems are somewhat different, and that we can learn from each other's experiences, what things have been successful, what things haven't been, why they have worked. And so, if you want to think of it as a final thought, in a way, it's the same thing I was saying about when I was a young child. Mm-hmm. This is a great way to have people understand each other better as people. Yeah. And the more of that we can do, I think, the more we start breaking down these stereotypes and moving to the type of world that I think all of us would like to live in.
Yeah, terrific. Your Honor, it was a great pleasure to have you here on our program. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Esse foi o STJ Entrevista. Muito obrigada pela sua companhia e aproveito para te convidar para conhecer o canal do STJ no YouTube, onde você encontra este e muitos outros conteúdos relevantes. Até a próxima. Tchau.